Good morning, everybody, and good morning to those who are in here. And welcome to Budapest, and welcome to our session on Equitable Research Partnership for Impact here. This topic has become very topical, of late. And the African Academy of Sciences, in collaboration with the European Commission and UNESCO, have put this together. Generally, this is for discussion. We will give a bit of a background and insight into what the three institutions are doing in terms of the policies we have and also the strategies. But we also give concrete examples. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker could not be here in person with us. So she sent an audio. So I encourage all of you to listen very carefully to the audio, and then from there we would have, some presentation from the three of us, just delineating some of the practical, concerns, the challenges, but also advice as to the way forward. And I'll encourage you all also to ask questions. Hopefully we'll have time so that you can have questions, and then from there, we'll use this as the way forward, for scientific research, the collaboration between the North, South, North, the triangular collaboration, how do we do it so that it's equitable? So without much ado, I would like to present the audio from my keynote speaker, Professor Isabel Odorin, which will be played. So thank you very much.
Distinguished Chair, delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Isabella Abodorin. I'm Chair in Africa Research and Partnerships at the University of Bristol in the UK. And it's really an immense honor to be able to contribute to the important discussions that you'll be having today. I'm sorry that I'm not with you in Budapest, and I am particularly grateful for this opportunity to share with you some reflections on the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations. The Africa Charter is an Africa-centered framework for reconfiguring or indeed rethinking research collaborations between Africa and the rest of the world, in particular the global north. It was launched last July in Windhoek and co-created by Africa's major higher education constituencies, the logos of some of which you see on this slide. The initiative around the Charter is jointly facilitated by the Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair at the University of South Africa, the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town, and us, the Perivoli Africa Research Centre at the University of Bristol. Colleagues, the theme of this year's World Science Forum is the science and policy interface at the time of global transformations. And in many ways, the essence and the core concerns of the Africa Charter speak exactly to this nexus, specifically to a need for shifts in science and higher education policy to enable and incentivize a deep transformation in the ways in which research partnerships unfold, in order to open up genuine space for finding truly transformative solutions to the crises and the collective challenges that we face locally as well as globally. What I'd like to do in the next 15 minutes or so is to share with you some reflections on the context within which the Charter has arisen, its major arguments and ambitions, its relevance for scientific communities, and lastly, the journey toward implementation that has begun. The context within which the Africa Charter has arisen is a context characterized on one level by an expansion in the volume of research collaborations between Global South and Global North, or more specifically between Africa and Global North. And I use these binaries acknowledging their deep limitations. On another level, this context is characterized by a growing sense of the increasing significance of such research collaborations for casting and recasting the fortunes of the regions and the countries involved. In Africa, such research collaborations already dominate the scientific output. This is data from the UNESCO World Science Report 2021, which shows that between 2017 and 2019, a large majority of scientific publications coming from the continent were co-authored with a foreign co-author, most times the co-author being from the global north. In some countries, of course, the percentages are lower, such as South Africa and Mauritius, but the overall picture is one of an overwhelming dominance of international, in particular global northern collaborations for the continent. Within this context, and within the context of an expansion in the volume of South-North collaborative research, there has been a growing debate and an increasingly intense debate about the need for greater equity in such partnerships. And over the last few years, there's been a proliferation of discussion forums as well as guidelines on equitable partnerships, many of which I'm sure some of you have been part of or have at least been aware of. And for the most part, such discussion forums, such efforts and guidelines around equitable partnerships have been largely Northern-led, with one or two notable exceptions. The focus of these efforts has very much been on the concrete collaboration arrangements that unfold within joint projects. On one level, an emphasis on the need for more conducive research management and administration modalities. On another level, and importantly, an emphasis on the need for greater mutuality and fairness in arrangements for the determination of research foci, the division of labor and capacity strengthening efforts, the decision-making on and the control of budgets, samples, and data, and last but certainly not least, the authorship of publications that arise from joint inquiry. There's been a sense that a greater mutuality and more fairness in these areas will lead to an enhanced uptake of research findings, a greater longevity of partnerships, and an enhanced integrity of the investigations themselves. These are critically important perspectives. But the Africa Charter argues that in many senses there is a need to think and to go beyond the equitable partnerships effort that we have at the moment. And the Charter does that by shifting the locus of consideration firmly to the continent, or if you like, to the south, and by grounding its arguments firmly in a conceptual frame and a set of analyses that draw on established post- and decolonial scholarship from Africa as well as the wider global south, and systems thinking. And based on these, the Charter focuses on the need for a deeper systemic transformation in research partnerships and relations. And its point of departure is the presently unjustly skewed, imbalanced global science and research ecosystem and Africa's unfavorable position within it. It doesn't really matter which metrics you look at, they all point to the same picture of this unfavorable positioning of the continent. Here I share some data again from the UNESCO World Science Report 2021, which shows that in 2018, Central, Eastern, Southern and Western Africa together contributed 10% of the global adult population. But only less than 1% of all researchers globally, that's the lowest percentage of all major regions, and less than 2% of all indexed scientific publications globally, of which half were from South Africa. It's important to note, of course, that there is a considerable volume of African research output that is not captured in global citation bases. But in many ways, this just serves to compound the subsidiarity of the continent and scholarship from within it. Another set of metrics relates to the academic rankings that we all live with. This is data from the QS rankings for 2024 this year, which show that only one African university, that's the University of Cape Town, is in the top 200. Only 7 universities are in the top 500, of which 5 are in South Africa and 2 in Egypt, and no university outside a few countries, South Africa, Ghana, Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Tunisia, is in the top 1,000. And very much the same picture emerges at the individual level. This is data from 2020, Clarivate, of the more than 6,000 highly cited scholars worldwide. Only 12 were affiliated in Africa, of which 9 were affiliated in South Africa. You might argue that the rankings, that these metrics are perhaps not relevant to the continent, but quite in contrast, the Charter argues that the Africa's positioning in the global science and research ecosystem is hugely consequential. It shapes the continent's economic and political prospects, and it reflects an uneven playing field in the production of scientific knowledge that in itself is a legacy of colonial histories. And it's important to understand or to note that this uneven playing field is not only made up of or determined by the asymmetries in concrete collaboration arrangements, as we've seen, the division of labor, the determination of budgets, and so on. The uneven playing field is also a function of a number of more underlying, multiple layers of power imbalance that shape and that pervade scientific knowledge production within and for the continent. Starting right at the core with power imbalances that arise from the dominance and the dominant use of Western Eurocentric epistemologies in the creation of new scientific knowledge and the marginalization of other ways of knowing. Closely related are power imbalances that arise through the dominant use of European, in particular, former colonial languages, most specifically English, in the creation of new scientific knowledge, and the marginalization of other languages to shape the knowledges that are produced. A third layer of power imbalance, closely linked to the first two, is the dominance of Eurocentric theories, concepts, constructs, and categories to scaffold and shape the generation of new scientific knowledge. And this is accompanied by continued orientation, which Paulin Hontangy calls extraversion, an orientation to the West as the site of scientific theory production, which is then applied in Africa or the South more widely. Closely linked to that is a layer of power imbalance that arises from the use of the development frame itself, the development frame that so often undergirds research and scientific knowledge production in and with and for Africa. The development frame on one level imposes almost always a unidirectional gaze from the global north to Africa as a site of investigation and a site of deficit that needs to catch up with northern advancement. But the development frame also delimits the areas and the issues that are deemed relevant for inquiry and for scholarship in the continent, and excludes other areas that might be priorities for Africa, but that do not fit within the framework of development. And lastly, and again, related to all the preceding power imbalances, a layer of power imbalance that arises from the deeply disparate institutional resourcing capabilities that exist between universities, research institutions in Africa and those outside of the continent. Resourcing and capabilities that include infrastructures, both data and physical infrastructure. The Charter seeks a leveling of the playing field, a redressing of all the layers of power imbalance in order to rebalance, or balance if you like, the positionings and the relations of Africa and global north in the global science and research ecosystem as a whole. The goal is a situation where scholars, institutions, and knowledges produced from the continent take their rightful place in the global academic effort. And this is a matter not only of social or indeed epistemic justice. It is also a matter of advancing Africa's political and economic aspirations and its place in the global political economy, and linked to that, a matter of reducing inequalities between regions and countries. It is also a matter of enriching global scholarship, of providing alternatives to the monochrome logic of Western thought, which, if you think about it, has been so important in engendering the crises and the challenges that we now collectively face as a humanity. And doing so, providing alternatives to this logic, will also mean opening possibilities for finding more potent solutions to precisely those challenges and those crises at local and at global levels. The Charter argues, and this is very important, that international research collaborations between Africa and in particular the global south, particularly the global north, precisely because they are so dominant, represent a critically important entry and leverage point for advancing such a more systemic shift. In other words, such collaborations have the potential to be transformative in the true sense of the word. What will that take? It will take a transformative mode of collaborations, one that explicitly and actively seeks to redress each layer of power imbalance at the level of epistemologies, language, theories and concepts, the development frame, institutional resourcing, and of course, the more concrete collaboration arrangements. And this is what the Charter's 10 principles speak to. But this is not enough. There is also a need for concerted efforts to establish a transformative collaboration mode as a benchmark and a standard practice across disciplinary fields, across the arts and humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and formal sciences. This will require change at the practice level, in individual scholarly mindsets and capabilities, in shared norms around what good collaborative practice, excellent collaborative research is, and of course in approaches and methodologies for joint inquiry. But also, and arguably more importantly, it requires change at the policy level, change in higher education and science policies, regulations and guidelines, because they constitute the rules of the game. They determine what kinds of collaborations are enabled and what kinds of collaborations are incentivized. And so the Charter's 6 aspirations call for precisely such policy change amongst universities, funders, publishers, research governance bodies, and ultimately governments themselves. What is the relevance of the Charter's aspirations and principles? Well, since its launch, and this is an image of the launch in Windhoek last year, the Charter has found extraordinary resonance globally, and it has already more than 100 signatory bodies comprising major university networks, learned societies, leading higher education institutions in Africa, in Europe, in North and Latin America, and in Australia. And beyond the signatories, an increasingly active interest of funders, of publishers, of international agencies, as well as scholars, all of which are seeking to consider the implications of the Charter for their operation, for their work. What this means is, on the one hand, that the Charter has become an important frame of reference for rethinking the future of Africa North, or perhaps more widely, South-North research collaborations, or perhaps even more widely, research collaborations globally. And it also means that the change, the deep transformation that the Charter calls for, is a change whose time has come and for which there is now a broad-based demand. Within this context, the journey towards implementing the ambitions of the Charter has begun. And I will sketch this just very, very briefly to say that it is a journey that is being steered and driven by the steering group for the Africa Charter, which comprises the major African higher education bodies that were the initial custodians and steward institutions for the Charter, the Association of African Universities, the African Research Universities Alliance, CODESRIA, the African Academy of Science, the International Security Institute, the Future Africa Institute at the University of Pretoria, as well as the University of Toronto and the core facilitating institutions, the University of Bristol, the University of South Africa, and the University of Cape Town. The journey towards implementation of the Charter will comprise three very broad strands of activity that will be pursued across geographies and that will center on critical reviews and reflections on existing collaboration practice, as well as existing higher education and science policy and regulatory frameworks against the Charter, in order to highlight and find good practice models, but also pinpoint the gaps that need redressing and adjustment. Further intellectual debate on the arguments and the analyses that underpin the Charter, highlighting the fact that in many ways the Charter remains a living document that will be refined, that will be elaborated with time. And lastly, a last strand of activity focusing on joint exchange and learning amongst all of those engaged in the thinking and the reviews and the action around the Charter. And together, this will help create a movement from what we currently have, which is a community of interest around the Africa Charter, to a community of true action to realize the change that the Charter calls for and the change whose time has come. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to wish you very fruitful and enriching further deliberations today, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you in the days and weeks and months to come. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for making time to make this presentation. Now we'll have a few slides, presentations from institutions, and I'll call upon my colleague, Dr. Ezra, to make his, presentation. It's just a quick overview of what the institutions are doing, and once we do that, then we'll have, a dialogue among the three of us, but you're also welcome to ask questions. So you can stop us in the middle, and ask questions, because this is more of an interaction, session. And there aren't too many of us here. Unfortunately, those online cannot, ask questions. But please, ask your questions in the chat, and later on we'll collate them and give some answers if possible. Before the end of the forum. Thank you very much. So I call upon my colleague, Ezra, to make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and good morning. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just make a very short introduction with some slides, and I'll be speaking from the perspective of UNESCO recommendation on open science as an example, maybe of a partnership. So, okay, open and equitable science for impactful collaboration. Perhaps before looking at that, let's see what inequality looks like, and in the keynote, this information was mentioned, but we didn't see the slide. So this is a slide from the UNESCO Science Report, and it's just showing where the world's researchers are, and you can see there's as was presented, certainly an uneven distribution of researchers around the world, hugely dominated by Europe, North America, and to some degree Southeast Asia. But you can say, very much so in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa particularly, very little. So what is unequal in science? Limited access to knowledge products like papers and data sets. We can say the collaboration and cooperation can be sometimes haphazard, can be non kind of structured, and then also restricted access to decision making about science and its funding. So for this reason, we do see this kind of unequal distribution of the world's researchers and many of the other things that were mentioned in the opening. So why would one want an open and collaborative science? Well, increased access to knowledge, improved quality and efficiency of the scientific process, acceleration of the UN Sustainable Goals, and the potential to bridge the gaps in science, technology, innovation policy and to fulfill this kind of fundamental human right to science. Sorry, that was the slide I was referring to there. So Sustainable Development Goals, human rights, and this idea of interest, access and knowledge to improve efficiency. So then, in relation to open science, so UNESCO in 2021, the 193 member states, now 194 member states, unanimously agreed on the UNESCO recommendation on open science. And very briefly what this is the first internationally agreed normative instrument on open science. It contains the first internationally agreed definition of open science. It spells out or describes the core values and guiding principles. It looks at the various actors and stakeholders and recommends actions on different levels to operationalise the principles of open science, and proposes in some cases, innovative approaches to open science at the different stages in the scientific cycle, and calls for development of an open science monitoring framework. And the definition I mentioned, so it makes the open science making scientific knowledge openly accessible, available and reusable for everyone, increasing scientific collaborations and sharing of information for the benefits of science and society, and opening up the processes of scientific knowledge, creation, evaluation and communication to societal actors beyond the traditional or conventional scientific community. And this collaboration and these partnerships involve various values and principles, and these are built in, these are contained in the recommendation, and they won't be a surprise to you. The values are quality and integrity, the collective benefit, so we have benefits for all, equity and fairness, and diversity and inclusiveness. And related to that is the principles on transparency, scrutiny, critique and reproducibility, equality of cooperation, responsibility, respect and accountability, collaboration, participation and inclusion, flexibility and sustainability. So again, as we heard in the introductory keynote, to strengthen this kind of collaboration, we need interdisciplinary scientific collaborations, international scientific collaborations, regional institutional funding mechanisms, and we'll hear more about that later, and increasing the openness of the scientific process, engaging with societal actors, as mentioned, beyond the traditional or traditional scientific community. And then, we need to ask ourselves regularly, what methods have changed? Are we seeing change? What procedures have changed? Which processes we follow, have they changed? And which new people are involving? And that can be other actors, as mentioned, or other parts of the world. And who has the capacity to engage in the scientific process and when? So there's an understanding maybe of three things on the understanding, but also outreach of information and knowledge, the co-creation and the co-governance. So three important aspects there. And we also can use policy to strengthen equitable collaboration. And this is building from shared objectives and mutual benefits, the promotion of access to resources, access to funding and infrastructure to ensure this refrain of of equal opportunities for all. So enhancing resource mobilisation and accessibility, fostering inclusive policy frameworks, strengthening capacity building, incentivising long-term partnerships that are sustainable, and embedding monitoring and accountability into the processes so we can see where we are. And so then, looking at expanding the scope of these collaborations, really focusing on the co-creation of knowledge, and again, as was mentioned in the opening, the South-South collaborations or North-South-South collaborations, these triangular collaborations. And as mentioned, the kind of some idea of monitoring. How do we know if these collaborations have been effective? So we need some metrics of success, of monitoring and understanding how successful these are. So again, the inclusion of diverse stakeholders, particularly underrepresented groups, measurements of equitable access to funding, to tools and to data, and ultimately, and again was mentioned in the opening, this idea of shared authorship and recognition in the output. So the outputs recognise and acknowledge all the inputs and contributors. So in the monitoring and feedback system, this should be participatory with all partners, and an open and systematic, transparent evaluation process. And if I may just maybe go to a little advertisement then for a partnership. So on open science I mentioned, and we have a very broad partnership in open science. We'll discuss it a little more in specifically what we're talking about when we talk about partnerships and the different types of partnerships. But this is a rather broad-based partnership that grew out of the development of the UNESCO recommendation on open science. And now we move to the implementation phase. We have a very broad partnership of many stakeholders all across the world and all across different disciplines, contributing to guiding the implementation. So we have, for example, 5 different working groups. We have about 1,000 members in total, and they, from different organisations, so different kind of partners, but assist us in guiding the implementation, practically to some degrees of providing funding for specific things, on providing specific information and training materials. We have what's called an open science toolkit, and these have particular specific guides, tools, and so on specific things. Intellectual property rights is one, funding is one, research evaluation is one. So quite practical things. And this is this is a partnership which is developed. It's a very broad-based one, and in implementing the open science. And it's an open partnership, so it's pretty much open to anyone of interest to join. So please, I suggest you have a look at the website if it's something that's interesting to you, and you can join us, you can join our working groups. And the last thing I'd like to mention as well, so I hope you're aware, but if you're not, the UN General Assembly at the end of last year declared the decade starting from this year to 2033 as the International Decade for Sciences for Sustainable Development. The official launch will happen in CELAC in Colombia early in December. And sorry, I'm one slide. Yeah, there we go. And this is a very wide partnership which is starting, and for all kinds of partners and many activities. So we can have from countries, institutions, even down to the level of individuals, specific activities and programs in a very broad-based partnership to deliver this International Decade for Sciences for Sustainable Development. So there's a, not as quick as I hoped, introduction, but hopefully okay, just to give you an idea what we're doing in UNESCO and really using this example of open science as an example of what we consider to be a good partnership, an open partnership, and one which is moving in the directions which I hope the keynote addressed and we hope to progress in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Any questions for Dr. Clark, Ezra? Any question from the audience? Or you wait till we really get warmed up, and then, but save your questions for him. All right, okay. Thank you very much. I just want to also present practically, he mentioned the, global standard setting instrument, the open science, and some of the areas of, partnership. The African Academy of Sciences, it's going to present practically how we're working, with UNESCO and also with the, European Commission on developing practical, equitable partnerships. So I'll just have my presentation. It's on? Okay, all right, okay. So, just a bit about the Academy. Sorry, I went too far. All right, okay. Just a bit about the Academy is that we are a continental academy. Next year we're almost 40 years, and we're going to have a big bang, and I invite all of you to join us if you can. Our mission is we want to transform lives through science, technology, and innovation. We also want to leverage on research excellence and leadership for sustainable development. We are the only continental academy which has the African Union Commission on Education, Science, and Technology sitting on our board. So that really makes it, truly, a continental academy. We have headquarters in all the 5 regional economic regions in Africa. We have in the north, unfortunately that one not showing. We have in the north, and the vice president is now in Morocco. We have in the west, and the regional vice president is in Burkina Faso. In the east, we have Burundi with a vice president. In Southern Africa, we have South Africa. And last but not the least, in Central Africa, we have the vice president in Cameroon. We have 3 tripartite mandates. And sometimes the role of academies such as this, for example, Hungarian Academy of Sciences, how do they leverage, to, create those platforms, for discussions such as this? And I'd like to commend, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for all these years bringing us together to really think about how we want to shape the world. But in particular, how do we ensure that we have equitable partnership where intellect are recognized, not only money. So we're going to give you, all the 3 different areas of what equitable partnership is. Ours is we want to recognize excellence, but award of fellowships, fellows, you have to apply. And this year we have over 150 African scientists globally, including diaspora, applying to be, so they will be nominated, and inducted, in December. But we also have another category of associate fellows. So we have people who are working, not necessarily African, but working in Africa region. They also have their affiliates. Then we also want to groom young people, so we have the young academies as well. So I'll encourage all of you who are here to join us to really shape science, technology, and innovation research for equitable partnership by developing not only Africa challenges, but also challenges that can create good models for the rest of the world. We also advisory think tank. As I speak, the African Union is developing, we are the only continent with 50 years strategic plan, and each one have 10 years. And we have the next 10 years coming up. and an African Academy of Sciences were very instrumental in designing the next 10 years of science, technology, innovation strategy for Africa called TISA 2024. The last but not the least is implementation of key STI programs for impact and effectiveness for sustainable development of the continent. Next, sorry, okay. Yes, we are in 10 disciplines. I won't belabor the point too much, but the thematic focus that we are in is policy governance, environmental and climate change, health and well-being, human and social sciences. I would say, many of the social scientists don't think they belong to these natural sciences, but we encourage the social sciences to help us. And that really resonates with UNESCO's promotion of science, policy, society nexus. We also want to champion social sciences for a more informed and resilient society. We have a new strategic plan. I won't belabor the point too much, but just to, indicate the various areas, because a lot of the time we have these strategies, even globally, without having real monitoring and evaluation to see how we're going. This new strategy for the next 5 years, our theme and key is we're looking at our people, our partnership, and excellence. And that's why we're very keen on this equitable partnership. What our journey so far? How are we, how are we getting on to this journey so far? We want to empower Africa, particularly mid-career, to become world-class leaders, scientists, and innovators. And I'm pleased to note that there are some young scientists, not only African scientists here, because we need to groom them. We need to create, develop the new generation, of scientists. Our work, in terms of people, want to provide an enabling environment for learning and growth, focusing on cultivating talent and capacity building in science, technology, and innovation across Africa. UNESCO mentioned that some of the standards that they're looking for, we really must, look at capacity building. And I'm also pleased to say that one of our biggest collaborators is the European Commission, and I won't, take the wind out of her sail. She's here to talk about it herself as really, truly an example of equitable partnership. We also want to nurture partnership to expand collaboration, enhance visibility, diversity, funding sources to support scientists, research, and innovation in Africa. And also excellence. Whatever we do, we want to support the best people, institutions, programs to undertake relevant research, fostering knowledge sharing and skills development. So why are we talking about equitable partnership? It is very important because we're looking, for many years and even in other institutions, we want to invest in the future for the Africa we want, the Agenda 2063. Many institutions would, like the AAS, would have developed strategic plan. But, for us, our strategic plan for the next 5 years is a comprehensive blueprint to guide the Academy's activity and growth over the next 5 years. One of the thrust biggest is capacity building, focus on developing African scientists, scientific talent through targeted training and mentorship program. Infrastructure development, UNESCO mentioned infrastructure. It is very key in scientific research. And one of the, practical examples of doing is capitalizing institutions and laboratory, but through the, European Union a program called ARISE. And my colleague Inge will give you the detail about it. But this is a partnership, which we have developed 2 years as a pilot. But because the pilot has been so effective with a lot of impact, fortunately, we hope to get, another, extension, of this. But above all, we also need to have sustainable funding. Not only funding from, outside, in terms of Africa, but we want to ensure that, countries also prioritize funding to be able to do a lot of the research. Unfortunately, we don't have, many countries, with the exception of, as the keynote speaker mentioned, exception of a few countries in Africa. But we'll call on many other countries in Africa to prioritize, science. And COVID was a good example about those who invested in science, build back better on COVID. So we call, on others to do that. Critical success factors that we need to have is that we need to have availability and access to science, adequate, stakeholder engagement and buy-in like we're doing now, equitable partnership around R&D, and also enable environment framework and, and instrument. Okay, so how do we, ensure that we have sustainable and equitable, R&I, research and innovation partnership? It is always important for us, as UNESCO said, co-design, co-create. We also need, the recipients also need to set the agenda, in the area of financing. But above all, we acknowledge that there's competition of priorities and restrict or influence fund flow, regional and global geopractice. But I think this is the time to work together, bring in the various actors to ensure that we have funding that is equitable, funding that can have impact, and a long-term, partnership, not necessarily in terms of money, but also, in terms of human capital development. So why equitable partnership? Well, from our Africa perspective, and also, following up on the keynote speaker, is that the partnership has to be African-owned, or the partnership has to be, whether it's Latin America, Brazilian, it has to be that own. And how do we do that? We ought to make sure that researchers and institutions are at the forefront of identifying the challenges that matter most to their communities and shaping the research agenda. We also want to have shared expertise, collaboration between global north and south, foster knowledge sharing, capacity building, allowing research to bring different perspectives and strengths to the table. And also, it has to be culturally appropriate solution. This is where some of the partnership has not been, but maybe working for others. Equitable partnering, also shared ownership, capacity building, and also has to be culturally relevant, solutions. What do we see for the future? The future we want for the Africa Agenda 2063, which is in 10 decades, and for the science, we are in the second decade starting next year. We want to empower empowered communities. We want to have sustainable development. We want to have global partnership, collaboration, which are equitable between the global south and the north, that will accelerate progress and position Africa as a leader in research and development. And by doing that, we want to have thriving economies in Europe, thriving economies in Africa, or globally, or in Asia, or Latin America, so that we would be able to advance in several of the areas, particularly the Sustainable Development Goal, but commonly that we would, again, like to see real globalization, where we work together equitably, respecting whatever, each other's resources, and expertise. So looking forward, reinforcement, repositioning, and expansion. And we look forward to all of you, working together with us to promote the African we want through equitable research partnership, for impact, because together we can. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'll call on our colleague Inge from the European Commission to tell us practically, that's why I didn't want to take the wind out of her sail, to tell us practically what the European Commission is, how they are working with the African Union to ensure that we have equitable research partnerships for impact. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much, Peggy and Erz. Indeed, what does a strong partnership mean and how it looks from the perspective of the European Union, European Commission and the Directorate General for International Partnerships that I am proudly serve. So maybe to start, I think it would be very good to frame what a strong partnership is. What does it mean? So it builds, as we heard, a mutual respect, a just and fair collaboration, and also a shared values, ensuring actually that all partners benefits through the clear goals and transparency and the trust and equitability, equal partnership that everybody strives for. So for instance, when we speak at the European Union recognizes that the potential of the science, technology, innovation, and research matters, and in addressing the development and the global challenges, actually, that's how we do it. So we work with the African partners, we work with the African Academy of Science and with the African Union Commission. We work with African countries and other players in it because we consider African continent a closest neighboring continent to us. And we also say that, yes, it is key to support our full transformation into this knowledge-based, technology-driven and led economic continent. So it's a two-way avenue for both, for the Europeans, but also for the Africans. And rightly, the European Union and the African Union Summit, it was back in 2022, confirmed that research and innovation is a key priority, and this is lay the ground actually for our renewed partnership. And we indeed committed, both of us, the African Union and the European Union, to step in the support for the scientist community and to strengthen the scientific cooperation and research cooperation by sharing technologies, by transferring our knowledge on the equal footing, and notably adoption of the African Union and European Union innovation agenda was another step. It came later in 2023, where we demonstrated that this also at a policy level cooperation can create a successful partnership and be a model focusing on our shared priorities like innovation, education, sustainable development, or thematic priorities, how to tackle the climate change, how to move gradually to the renewable energy resources, what we do if another pandemic strikes, what we can do together on the public health. So indeed, the partnerships, they drive the innovation, they address the global challenges, and they enable the resources sharing. And here, another example from the European Union is a global gateway strategy, an initiative that comes as a package of the global gateway strategy that highlights the combination of the cooperation that been discussed previously, the infrastructure, but also the human development aspect and investment that creates the sustainability, that creates an effective impact on the ground. And indeed, it combines like investment projects, being it building roads, putting cables for the internet, or building the solar panels, while with this investment, we also enable an environment for education, for skills, for innovation, for research that needs to come from the countries where we operate. We also help to regulate the frameworks, the policy frameworks, and also to work on the good governance, because that is needed actually to create a good, solid ecosystem in which the scientists and researchers can operate. And this way we see it that we are supporting the human development and that we are strengthening the capacities of our partner countries. And notably, it is not limited only to Africa. We also cooperate in Asia and in Latin America. When we speak about the education, when we speak about the research, it is not just the thematic priorities on their own right. They are very well incorporated in our Global Gateway strategy and initiatives we are doing. They embedded to achieve the bigger result and a more effective impact on the ground. And the European Union and its member states made the education and research as a pillar of our 150 billion euro Global Gateway Africa-Europe investment package. And finally, I think we need also to talk that there is a common misconception of the partnership that is merely or primarily seen as a transactional, right? When we speak about the institutions like UNESCO, the European Commission, because we often come from that donor perspective because we're bringing funding. But I think we need to destroy this myth. We're bringing technology, we're bringing knowledge, and we're also gaining a knowledge, you know, from the continents we cooperate. So in reality, actually, this partnership to be successful, it requires alignment on the principles that Dr. Ertz presented, on the values, on the long-term goals, and it should be evidenced by this international research initiatives that been presented, emphasizing the inclusiveness, emphasizing the ethics, emphasizing the transparency. So to finish, just to give you also an indication of what the European Union have done, and it goes back to 2021, when the European Commission published a communication on the global approach to research and innovation. It was a starting point that brought forward a number of the key principles and values that underpin our openness and allows us to endorse and implement at the international level, including with the partners like UNESCO or other organizations. And actually strive for the safe common basis for the effective and trusted cooperation between the scientists, and notably addressing the challenges that everybody is confronted around the world, but also addressing the fact that there is a fast evolving research and technological landscape. And in 2024 was the last time when the Belgium presidency took the Council of the European Union, and they hosted for that international ministerial meeting on the principles and the values of the international research and innovation cooperation. And during that meeting, we managed to have the Brussels statement, so to came up with the declaration that was adopted and currently serves as a compass actually for the future of our international cooperation in research and innovation, being it with our partner countries, but being it also with the other international organizations. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll come back.
Thank you very much, Inge. So we've given you, perspectives. The global from UNESCO, the regional from Regional European Union Commission, and also the Africa Union, the Africa perspective. Any questions to any of the speakers before we continue? Any questions? No? Okay. Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Shaibi Tamer from Tunisia, and I appreciate really the presentation of Professor Peggy about the perspective of the African Academy of Science, in which I'm a fellow. And I know how the work that has been done with the AAS within the Africa for the scientists and mainly for the young scientists. So my questions is about the partnership and the partnership between the African countries and the developing countries. And I know that there is an unbalanced power between these both. How we can ensure this partnership between these two levels. So there is level where there is limited, even the budget, the capacity building, etc. And for the others who have this capacity, how we can ensure this partnership within this unbalanced power between these two boats. So I think that it's a big challenge, that because once we have the power at this level, we can't really, we are very, very slow even in making this partnership strong. And so I want to know what do you think about it. And my second question is for the European Commission. So I know that the European Commission, they have done a lot, especially for supporting projects and giving also some budgets for that. So what is it beyond this support of the project? Are there any other things to follow up? Because it's okay, we can have projects and the projects will be finished. So the partnership will be, there is no partnership at all. So how we can ensure this partnership within the supported mainly projects that we are assured by the European Commission? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for those questions. One of our flagship projects, that we have with the European Union is the ARISE, Africa Research Innovation for Scientific Excellence. This program is a 25 million, project between the African Union, African Union agreeing with European Union to identify the priorities. So we have 4 priorities. And through that, I'm pleased to announce that we have 47 PIs, in 38 countries across Africa. And the beauty about this is that this 37 PIs are already in networks, working, across Africa. But the agenda was identified, the agenda was set by these researchers and the countries where they are. And one of them that, I followed, and is a young lady, and also, you would agree with me that we haven't really developed ocean science, oceanography in Africa. So we have this young lady, an interesting project looking at how oyster production, how climate change is affecting oyster production. So she's looking at, climate change, effect of climate change, sea effect, also how it affects other crustaceans, but also generally how it's affecting food security. And also developing, the ocean data going back with 300 years. she is working with other collaborators in West Africa. And what EU did was that there was a state-of-the-art equipment which wasn't available in West Africa. So EU funded the capitalization of this laboratory, which is being used by all other West African countries. I'm only giving one. There are, good examples about AI. How can Africa countries also leapfrog in, AI? So they have themselves created, that consortium working together. But at the same time, they're also working with, some of them are working with collaborators in Europe, in European laboratories. So you see, it is a very good example of EU and AU working together, because the two continents are close. And we know about all these issues about, migration and all that. But this program has really enhanced what we call brain circulation in Africa, but also, partnership in terms of knowledge sharing between, Europe and Africa. So I could go on, with so many examples. So we're saying that these are, partnerships that are designed equitably. We Africans set the agenda, and in fact, Global African Union set the agenda with the EU being implemented in 38 countries on the continent. And hopefully, and these are young researchers, mid-career researchers, who normally wouldn't get funding to do this kind of, first-class, world-class research. There's so many of them, genomics, bioinformatics. How do we keep the information in Africa and make use of it? Pharmaceutical industry. So these young researchers are doing some amazing work. And I'll encourage you to go online, and read some of them. So thank you. So I think the next one was for EU.
Indeed. Thank you very much. It very much links also to the questions that we have for later, for the panel discussion, being it how can the funding models for the, to be adjusted to support this long-term and sustainable research initiatives. So I think the European Union showed also a quite a dense shift from the way we operated before, right after the COVID pandemic in 2022, by releasing the Global Gateway Strategy. It is a mental shift in the way we perceive the partnerships, and I think this also related to overall change, gradually moving for this development assistance terminology to the international partnerships that actually recognizes that our partners are equal, that everybody that sits around the partnership table has possibilities to bring an added value with their strengths that they have. And the other partners can complement on let's say, the weak sides. And when we look, notably the European Union operates through the project-program relationship. That's how we see it as a cooperation with our partner countries. And we do a lot of efforts to change the way we prepare for the programs and the projects to make sure that they are sustainable and that they can continue even if the funding from the European Union or other international donors would stop. And I think ARISE program, I would like to bring to everyone's attention, is exactly the outcome of the African Union, European Union Innovation Agenda, so which is a political and policy commitment between the two continents, which predefines the priorities of cooperation. So there you also see how the policymakers plays a role in. And then you have this global gateway approach that we have an investments on one side, but a regular project still like support to the African Academy of Science, and run the continental programs. Like ARISE, so the African Research Initiative for the Scientific Excellence. what we do, we change the length of our programs. So for example, the ARISE program started in 2020. It's a 5-year program, and we are preparing for the second edition. So as you could see, the length of the program will be 10 years, right? So this is already a change. Another thing that we did, that besides funding the researchers, so the individuals, you need also see an informal impact of funding of individual researcher has on the hosting institution. And then on the country where the hosting institution is located, right? Another thing is that we want to complement. So if we indeed provide funding to the researcher produce the outputs, and this can be services, new goods. We're helping through the program also to advertise. So it means we're addressing the local needs, but the program delivers a globally marketable goods or services. And this is where we step in by giving a visibility to those scientists and researchers. And one step is that we embrace the cooperation with the European Research Council or with other scientific institutions by bringing those African brilliant people, young people, you know, to our hosting institutions to strengthen that collaboration, to bring visibility to the talents that we have in other continents that we could indeed embrace and work together in the collaborative partnerships. And this is not should be seen through the lens of the financing. You know, I think that the network that we create based on the principles and values that we all share makes us strong. This network of researchers and scientists grows, right? Even the individual that receives the funding on specific project has a possibility to create its own team, right? So at the end we multiply, and if through our RISE program we have 47 researchers in 38 countries, at the end of the day we're reaching 1,000. When we calculate all the hosting institutions, all the participating members within the teams, you know. So we indeed changing as an EU, we are changing the way we cooperate, we are embracing the equal partnerships, and we are empowering people to take decisions addressing their needs, their country needs, their continent needs.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay.
Thank you for this very important topic. My name is Rana Dajani. I'm a Palestinian professor of molecular biology in Jordan. To follow up on my colleague's question, first of all, you don't know what you don't know. So as the like for example, the European Union wants to help the African Union or work together. And I'm speaking of the context of Jordan, which is very similar to many of African countries, is that there's a huge gap in the administrative support offered to scientists as they do their research. And this is kind of a blind spot because no funding goes to train administrators on how to handle large, complex research. So how do you ensure to uncover these blind spots and then work towards improving them? So that's number one, because people only talk about research and scientists. They don't talk about the admin that supports them. The second point which follows, if there are gaps in these equitable so-called partnerships, who's the place to go to complain? Meaning, is there monitoring and evaluation? Are there places to seek something is going on that's not right or not, for example, sustainable? And I'll give one example. There was a big 10 million telescope project in South Africa that only funded one African PhD student. And the assumption was, okay, and then what happens after that? So, and the professors who were actually taking the position to be head of these projects were all coming from the global north and then leaving. So, thank you. Those are my two questions.
Thank you very much, Peggy. I will take very valid questions. indeed something that we are discussing often at the high-level policy dialogue that is driven by another DG. We have a Directorate General for the Research and Development, and this is exactly where these challenges are put on the table when we speak with the African counterparts from the African Union Commission. So 3 things. When we talk about the administrative and technical gaps, I think this is where the African Academy of Science comes into the picture. So the program like ARISE, again, indeed encompasses a call for proposals for the individuals, but it also has a capacity building component, a very strong one. And this is where the continental organization like African Academy of Science steps in. We have a coordinator. The coordinator works with the researchers and scientists and provides the needed training. Also, they have a right to complain if there are issues with the hosting institutions. This is also addressed within the framework of the program. Of course, one program will not solve an issue, as you said. Countries are very different in terms of their development structures, transparency level, and etc. How to handle all this? The European Union constantly have a political and policy dialogues, right? So there are other programs that comes in synergies as a complementary thing. For example, we do work from the different instruments. I could mention the twinning and TAIEX, and probably you might be aware of those as you live in Jordan, and we used to utilize those also programs in the Palestine when I was working in the Middle East. And interesting thing, this helps actually to build capacities of the government authorities that are in charge. So for example, we also work with the ministries of education, ministries of research, ministries of science. We have other networks. We have the European Research Council. They cooperate with the scientists and the scientific institutions globally, right? So these also ways of addressing an issues. We have scientific policy dialogues. We have my colleague actually currently running a parallel session and presenting the science diplomacy report. So there are multiple projects, programs, initiatives, and dialogues that we are running to address those issues and to build a solid scientific ecosystem in Africa. Admitting that indeed we have least developed countries, we have more developed countries, and they all have different needs. But I think this is why, at the end of the day, the ARISE program's beauty is that we capable to reach to individuals. So it's a bottom-top approach program, comparing to other programs that usually comes from top to down. Where indeed the scientist becomes a representative of his country, saying that this is the need for my country, for my continent. And then to finish on the South African example of the one individual that received the support, we do say, we encourage, raise visibility about the projects you are doing, because this is very important, because that will help you to expand your network, to find friends abroad, and to scale up your project, that indeed it would not be just one go project that was funded by international donor and stopped at one stage, and what next, right? You would ask yourself as a scientist, what next? So networks are essentially important, and this goes back to my colleagues on collaborative partnerships, where we all agree that's where we need to work, right? Yeah. Yeah. Sharing our capacities, knowledge, and experiences.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ingi. So now we have UNESCO here. So we would like to, ask from UNESCO's perspective, how do we empower, all these stakeholders, in this partnership? So, Dr. Clark, what strategies can help identify common grounds and create value for everyone involved? And the second one is that how do you ensure, how do we ensure that the partnership continues? You know, just to follow on for the question you had, how do we ensure that these partnerships continue to evolve, to meet new challenges and opportunities? Can partnerships grow in scope, or they usually limit to their, initial agreement? You are, global, representing every, 198 countries, and given the leadership and the standard. So, what is your perspective on this?
Thank you very much, Peggy. I mean, I think a well-planned, a well-designed partnership from the beginning would aim to avoid some of the problems we mentioned, of course. As we've discussed a little bit, partnership is a word which covers a huge amount of things, and different. There are very, very different types of partnerships, from a partnership between two organisations, even down to individuals, to huge collaborative partnership mechanisms. So, but all of them, I would think, do have some common features and approaches to develop a good partnership. Now, we spoke about the funding model, and I would say traditionally, not UNESCO's not a funding organisation, but earlier experience in the UN, where we provided funding in a partnership. These can easily become rather unbalanced, or traditionally were rather imbalanced, because maybe there's a perception that if you provide the money, the other partner, I don't want to say it bluntly, does what they're told. But really to recognise it as a partnership, so one benefits, or there's benefits in both ways, and really to build that up. And again, a previous organisation I worked for, we would kind of joke sometimes that partnerships within the organisation would be we give and they take, and that's considered a partnership. And these things are not sustainable because, okay, maybe once it's okay, but the second time maybe there's some reluctance to do that. So it's really important to get to your question, strategies which can identify common ground. Really, we need to start, as we've said, with shared values and principles. And the values and principles I mentioned in the opening, in the open science recommendation, I would suggest is a good way to start. And starting early, we've seen again a recent example where one could say a very good concept for a partnership was developed and shared, but because some of the potential partners were approached only once it had been established, there's then maybe a reluctance to really engage. And so start early is very important, so that all your potential partners have buy-in from the beginning, have input into how it is, so that when the partnership developed, it genuinely is a partnership. Those voices are listened to. So really listening and co-creation, agreeing on who sets the priorities, agreeing on how these decisions are made, and really be participatory in starting to develop these partnerships. Promoting transparency and equity. So understanding in advance about funding, about expectations. In a partnership as well, all partners don't have to do the same thing. Sometimes, a partner can have an important but small role to play, and sometimes it's, full engagement. So it's really recognising what the expectations are and how we deliver. Also, we talked about sustainability, to really see how it fits within the broader frameworks. And from our perspective, of course, we need to look in the bigger term, or the bigger picture. So looking at this sustainable development goals, regional development plans, as you mentioned them, particularly what we see for Africa, and then leverage the relevant tools. Again, I'll come back to the open science recommendation. I'm really using this as an example. And then in this process of monitoring and evaluation, so not just starting, but really to develop from the beginning the measurable outcomes and the needs of all partners, and having a process by which one can do that, by one can monitor, so that you don't run up to a problem late on in the process, which could perhaps undermine or prevent the successful delivery. I mean, the partnership is there to do something and not to undermine this delivery and ensure that there's mutual benefit. Partnership, I mean, is an obvious thing to say, should benefit both partners. And if it's a one-way thing, there won't be full engagement. So then quickly to just mention how we ensure it continues. Really, it's repeating a little what I said, but ensure this kind of feedback, monitoring and accountability is built in so that all the partners can see what the expectations are from all of them. And as the project or activity or initiative progresses, one can start to see how that's going, and we have a system that everyone can see how they're participating and how their engagement. The partnerships need to be flexible. There's no point in establishing something and then insisting when situations change, resources change. So we need to have flexibility in that. And there may be some requirement from capacity building, so maybe all partners aren't on the same level, so that could be integrated early on to have some capacity building activities built into the partnership early on, but early on. I mean, we don't need to continue to do that. And I think to maintain a dialogue throughout. So really to maintain a dialogue and a process of feedback and to avoid any problems further down the line. So I think there's some general.
So thank you very much. Oh, okay, we have a question? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just last question, maybe. I'm Dr. Asmat Zidan, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at College of Public Policy at Qatar Foundation, but my permanent residence is in Toronto. So my question actually is about, with all the global challenges that you have mentioned in your presentation, such as climate change, the planetary crisis, health crisis. So there is more or pressing need actually for to establish cross-regional platforms for collaborative innovation and impactful research. So what challenges are you facing in achieving this? And what mechanism can be implemented that can create quick or tangible outcomes to ensure equitable participation of smaller nations and smaller regions in the global south, and to ensure also participation in the global science agenda?
Or UNESCO take it?
Well, I think we all can somehow share, right?
We can yeah.
Right, so from the perspective of the European Union, actually, we do look into this in particular. And again, I take the ARISE program as an exemplary program in this, because it's a continental program. And that's where we can bring scientists from the different regions, from the countries that has a different development level. So by creating this community, we also help the scientists build capacities by learning from each other. That is a very important thing. So programs that are built by, in these cases, a program that is built by Africa, exactly what was said by Dr. Ertz, from the beginning, the ownership comes from the Africa. The program that is run by the African organization, that is credible, that is recognized and appreciated at the continental level, being south, west, east, and north. And then the scientists that represents this beautiful, beautiful, flower coming from the different countries with different perspective, different cultures, and different needs. But at the end of the day, they all represent the continent. Right? So our main, let's say, opportunity that we look forward for in the future is how to scale up now what is being created by those wonderful 47 scientists, how to move further. And this is exactly where institutions like yours comes into the picture and shows how international partners, being UNESCO, being European Union, UN, World Bank, or Qatar Foundation, or any other private foundations can step in to help to scale it up. So to bring those projects to the reality, we made them globally marketable, but we need to make sure that they are recognized, because everything what these scientists create are useful for us. for countries in Europe, for countries in the North, for countries in Asia, you know. That's what we need to admit. And this collaborative approach based on values, shared values, respect among the partners, and trust, I think, are the most important elements to succeed. We need to work together. It's a global world. And with any challenge that we are confronted, being at political level or not, we can manage by being together. We need to keep the spirit, you know, of co-creation and collaboration.
Thank you very much. I know it's very interesting, but I think, you know, our time is up. So if I'll just call on UNESCO, what are your closing, you know, what advice, you know, would you give us, you know, being at the continent, well, being at the global level, what advice you would give us in moving forward with this equitable partnership?
Thank you very much. I think very briefly, just that from our experience, really, the partnerships really have to start early. I don't not emphasize this enough. Really, to listen to the voices and to answer slightly the question. For the recommendation on open science, in the creation of the recommendation, this was open to all UNESCO member states. 193 member states were engaged in the process of developing this. All the voices of all the countries was listened to. And in the implementation, the partnership for the implementation is open to all. We listen to the voices from all the member states, from various stakeholders in that. So I think it's really to change the kind of mentality or perception of establishing something and then finding the partner afterwards and them agreeing to what you've already decided. Really to engage at an early stage, to get the buy-in and the comments and opinions, because you know, there are cultural differences, there are differences of how things are done and what the requirements are. And so it's to listen, to co-produce, and to establish the partnerships really in a kind of collaborative and inclusive way, and then to monitor it to ensure that this is actually working. So I think this, in kind of general terms, and using the open science recommendation as an example of what we consider an ongoing important partnership that has long-term goals, very long-term goals. So we have to have sustainability here, because what we're achieving can't be done now. It requires changing so many things, kind of mentality and approaches as well. So it's really starting early, listening, collaborative approach, and monitoring, and continue to listen and to be flexible, and really have the shared values and shared goals and understand all those things.
Okay, thank you very much. And you know, I can agree more with all of you. But for us as take home, the Africa we want is that we want the Africa research agenda holds immense influence, both global and also in Africa, because it can be in Africa, for Africa, by Africa, but also has global application. So that's why we need, you know, those kind of equitable partnership. And like we said, we also need to monitor, you know, what we're doing. We need to be flexible. You know, what we're doing, we have good models. Why don't we use those models to leapfrog instead of reinventing the wheel? And also by doing that, then we'll have an Africa which is resilient, an Africa where our demographic dividend, you know, has the full potential. And Africa is the future. And I call on all of us, you know, globally, to collaborate with Africa to make, you know, Africa truly the Africa we want, in partnership with our global partners. Thank you very much. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the panelists. First to thank Dr. Aboderin, who is connected from the UK, you know, keynote, who unfortunately couldn't come, you know, be with us. We also want to thank our colleague Inge from the European Commission for making time. And last but not the least, my colleague, Dr. Clark, Ezra Clark, from UNESCO. And also, I thank all of you for making this really interactive. I'm sure if, some of the questions that you had, we couldn't take them because we're running out of time, but it shows the interest. So let's say, with the outcome, from this, conference, and forum, hopefully this equitable partnership, which is now becoming a very topical issue, can be addressed for the future that we all want, not only in Africa, but globally. So thank you for being with us.